Okay. It is, what are we going to call that, 6:01. And I'm going to call us to order. That's okay. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. There we go. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. All right. Just a reminder that at points in the meeting, when the meeting chair requests public comment, members of the public shall indicate their desire to speak. All public comments shall be addressed to the board of directors and limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The board of directors may choose to respond to comments or request staff to respond at the conclusion of the public comment period. There are no public in attendance right now, but we'll check in with them a little bit later. So agenda, item B, the agenda. Does anybody have any changes? Anything you want to adjust? No? No. All right. In seeing that, we're going to go ahead and adopt tonight's agenda as is. Public comment on closed session items. There are no public in the room, so we're going to go ahead and at 6:03, we're going to go into closed session. Thank you guys, we'll see you at 7. Okay. By my look, it looks like we are coming back from closed session at 7:03. There is no reportable action from our closed session. And we're going to go into our open session. We're on item F, the consent calendar. Is there anybody who has any questions?
No questions on the draft minutes. Move to approve.
I've got a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I had a question on resurfacing, 14.2. How long is that going to last?
It's a Luke question. For the tennis court?
Oh, how long is the resurfacing gonna like hold up?
Yeah.
It's completely dependent on weather as like one of the main factors
And
and
traffic.
underlying conditions, but those courts are in good shape. They've been holding up really well, so I mean, I expect to get, I'm hoping for 5 years. Yeah, but that would be under like best conditions.
So 2.
Right.
Yeah, 2 to
That
5. No one's playing on them, you know.
It stops raining.
All right. I'll
Any
second
other
it.
questions?
I'll second it then.
I've got a second.
Public.
Anybody from the public have a comment on the consent calendar? No? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nope. There we go. Public comment open time for items not on the agenda. I'm not going to read that because I read it at the beginning. I don't see anybody. Do you want to make a public comment that's not on the agenda?
I was otherwise occupied. I didn't read that part.
I will say that you can speak on non-agenda items for a maximum of 3 minutes. Do you have anything you'd like to
I
say?
have nothing to say.
All right. All right. In closing that, we're going to go to item H, district matters.
Great. So H1, update on the pension liability. I gave you guys a little staff report. Just a couple things I wanted to touch on, and I put it in the report, but I just want to kind of say it out loud. So every year in August, CalPERS releases what they call their valuation reports, which looks at present value of our pension liabilities, but it's not exactly present value because in August they release a report that's based on June 30th of the prior year. So in August 24, they gave you a valuation for June 30th of 2023. And then to make it even more confusing, whatever comes out in that August 24 report doesn't actually have any level of impact on our expenditures for pension until the next fiscal year, which is 25-26. So it gets a little confusing. Even Jeff and I found ourselves as we were putting some of this stuff together. The years kept kind of blending, even though the numbers were right, we just were stating the wrong years, so we're like, oh yeah, okay, that's that year, not this year, everything else. At any rate, Jeff Naylor, who I know everybody here knows, was on our board for 5 years. During that time, one of the things that he took on as a board member was trying to gain a more clear understanding of a very cloudy, uncomplex situation known as CalPERS. He is for all practical purposes, our kind of resident expert on this. He certainly is more knowledgeable on it than I am. During his time on the board and reading those reports and understanding that they were hard to understand, he took the time to kind of put together a summary report of them and then refresh that every year. He's been off the board now for 4 years, but he's continued to devote his time volunteering, updating those reports and spreadsheets and everything for us, and is gracious enough to accept our invitation to actually come down and present the report, because he really is the primary author of it. So with that said, I absolutely want to turn it over to Mr. Jeff Naylor, have him go through the report, and then if there's any questions, he and or myself can do our best to answer them.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Okay, let's get started. I'm going to go real briefly through the different pages of the report and give a quick thumbnail of what's changed on each, if anything. Glossary page 2, the simple update was that I put in the 2022-2023 discount rate to update a table that we've got in that.
Yep.
There were no further changes in either the glossary or the history. Does anyone have any questions about either of those documents? You've read them before. Okay. All right, turning to page 5. This is the unfunded accrued liability, i.e. our debt. The return for 2022-23 was 5.8%, the discount is 6.8%, so they didn't quite make what they had hoped for. FTE was down 1 this year, and our unfunded liability went up $322,563. Okay, we'll talk about page 5. We'll talk about each of these pages in a little bit more depth. Page 6, the annual cash payments. 2021, when the chart that was updated started, our annual cash payments were forecast at $654,000. 2030-31, they're forecast to rise just less than $1 million. It's about a 35% increase over that protracted period of time. The 2024-25 cash payment was up $120,000 from the previous year. Okay, page 7, cover
Jeff?
page.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Mhm.
Just so that they understand on these, how these payments are kind of calculated, because there's 2 different components of it. One is kind of the normal cost, which is in there. That is what we pay as a percentage of payroll. And then second is the unfunded accrued liability part of it. That is that kind of lump sum that says, well, you're not fully funded, so here's how much you need to pay, so that way in 30 years you will be fully funded. So that is, these numbers, and correct me if I'm wrong, are a combination of all of the above.
Nope, but that takes care of my next page, thank you. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to expand on these things when we get to the actual page. This is just a summary of what's changed on each page. Thanks, Eric. Page 7 is the FTE covered payroll and comparison to the unfunded liability. 2023 FTE went down 1, covered pay went up $63K, the unfunded liability up $322K, as previously mentioned. Page 8, normal costs versus PETRA plans. This will just be something to go through on that page that reflects the disparity between the so-called classic plans and the PEPRA plans. Page 9, the additional discretionary employer contributions. We'll discuss that when we get to that page, but that table's been updated as well. Composite participant data. This is a PERS chart that talks about how many folks we have on, showing as retired, active, et cetera, versus Transparent California, which is a site that I use quite often to try and double check them. There is a disparity between CalPERS and Transparent, but we'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, those are the pages that have changed. And moving on to page 5. So, I have a tendency to look back at a couple of years, and I'm sure there are some charts in these reports that you keep on looking at and going, why is he still talking about 2014? Why is he still talking about 2018? Well, there's a reason for that, at least in my mind. I came on the board, I believe, in 2015. The previous board had created a sustainability committee to look into seeing what they could do to bring down the amount of staff that we had in this district, and they were successful. We had at least one staff member in the park leave. We consolidated a position between park and rec, so we now have a park and rec manager as opposed to 2 managers. And right after that, we removed the relief firefighter. We eliminated that position. These are all based on their recommendations. And then our fire chief, our last fire chief, retired. So we went in a rather short period from about 20 employees down to 18 employees. Actually 22 employees down to 18 employees. So that was by 2018. So that's sort of when we sort of right-sized the ship in terms of staff. Okay? So having said all that, if I can read my writing, I'll move to 2022, 2023, and the changes there. One of the things to note was the budget amount for 2022-2023 was $6.585 million. The UAL reported at that time was $6.849 million, or 104.02% of the budget. I think that's a high water mark for this district, something to be concerned about. Again, the budget, the return on investment, the return on, the rate of return, of 5.8 was not enough to offset the 6.8 discount rate, and it raised UAL by $322,500. Now, the preliminary, looking forward to the future a bit, the preliminary rate of return for next year's report has been forecast at 9.3%, which is well above the 6.8% discount rate. So if all remains the same, we should see a reduction in the UAL next year. That's again if all things remain the same. However, additions to covered payroll, additions to staff could certainly change that. There are environmental issues as well as the ones that are inside the district that could change that or modify it slightly. Also, keep in mind that the last time, I think it was 2021, where we had a bellwether year and we reduced the UAL dramatically. The very following year, we were way below that discount rate, and it more than offset the reduction that we realized in the UAL. So, just something to keep in mind. Okay, moving on to page 6. What I used to call the ARC, but it's no longer referred to as annually required contributions. They're now UAL payments or UAL contributions. And these are historically, at least in the short term, the amounts that the district pays entirely, no help from the employees. And generally is paid, I believe, in the month of July, so that we don't end up with, interest charges for paying it monthly, like is also an option. That usually saves us somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 a year. again, the employer, not the employee, bears all the risk of these, of that cash payment. And also, when we think about normal costs, which Eric talked about earlier, the amount that comes out of employees' paycheck and the employer also ponies up, is added to it to make the entire contribution, or the entire payment. So in 2024-25, the UALP, I'll call it, is $739,226, or 10.35% of the budget. An increase of $120K from 2021, and once again, by 2030-31, is forecast to rise to just below $1 million. Okay? All right. Page 7 is the FTE covered payroll and UAL payment comparison. Again, I went back to I kept 2014 on there just to highlight the 11 and 11 or 22 FTE that were on at that point in time. And you can see by 2018, we're down to 9 and 9 with 18. That's our full complement, I believe. This past year, so since 2014, FTE count was reduced by 5, payroll reduced by 150,000, but the UAL increased by $3.925 million. Of that, safety UAL increased by $2.998 million. I've already talked about why I think 2014 is relevant, so we'll skip that. From 2022, covered pay increased 633,000. FTE is down by 1 at 17, and UAL increased by 322,600. I think that's the third time I've mentioned that. Okay, I'll move on. Normal cost comparison, use page 8. So, without going into a huge amount of detail, and I know I've spoken to this before on other occasions, the PEPRA plans are designed to maintain a fairly even share of employee and employer payments on every paycheck. Not so for the classic plan. Now, on the miscellaneous side, the classic plans are not, I would say, egregiously different, but they are different. And they have not changed much at all in the last 7 or 8 years. On the safety side, they've never changed in the last 7 or 8 years. And the employer share is up almost 6%. So that's money that's coming right out of your tax dollars, your fees, et cetera, being diverted from programs they're supposed to pay for. Okay, so I've created a chart that analyzes what would happen if we started increasing. And this is, by the way, something that the employer has to bring to the table. It's not going to happen magically. Nobody other than the employer is going to change the amount that the employee has to take out of their paycheck, unless it's either negotiated or with the union, or for the classic employees dictated, I guess is the best way to look at it. But for the employees, and the miscellaneous employees, it's not a big far reach. 1% would pretty much true up everything and make them almost equal in terms of parity with the PEPRA plans. On the other hand, the variance right now with the safety group, the safety tier 1 group, is almost 17%, that the district is paying more than the employees themselves. So anyway, as I've said before, and I think I said this at the emergency meeting a while back, it would be very nice to negotiate something where the firefighters in safety tier 1 started paying a little bit more for their own pensions. I have to wonder if the Pepper employees wonder why they're treated so shabbily with regard to their payments as opposed to the tier 1. But that's just, I'm probably not supposed to say that, but that's how I feel. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Again, it would be up to the board and the district to either negotiate or impose any changes to the employee percentage. Page 9, additional discretionary employer contributions. Now, we've talked about this before, and last year, you may recall that the baseline for quote-unquote amortizing these unfunded amounts is 20 years. Last year, when you looked at this table, you didn't have to put in any discretionary payments to keep on 20 years. This year, surprisingly, miscellaneous classic, you'd have to make a $3,380 payment every year, and safety, a $24,774 payment every year in order to get back to 20 years being the timeline. So things change. If we don't make our discount rate, that'll continue to change in a negative way. However, I did want to bring up that when you look on both of these charts, miscellaneous classic and safety tier 1, there seems to be a sweet spot, and that is 10 years. You'll notice that payments that would be made annually for both classic and for safety tier 1 are substantially less than if you tried to pay it off in 10 years. Something to consider. But nothing stays the same. These tables are likely to change every year. There's nothing to say that you won't be paying more. But again, as we pointed out earlier, if indeed 9.3% as the return from this past year happens and things throttle down a little bit, you might even need to pay less. But again, I want to caution you, these are extra monies on top of the monies that you are already paying to try and amortize this debt, and it further takes away from the amount of money you have to spend on your programs and your employees. So, there's that. I did want to note that I left the termination language off again this year. I do not think that whether CalPERS imposed a 5.06% or a 3.06% discount rate, if we wanted to terminate any of, say, the safety program, that we would be willing to come up with $8.7 million or $15.8 million in order to do that. So I didn't even think it was a discussion. Okay, moving on to page 10. Composite participant data, and I've added a table, normal cost comparison of employer payments over budget or salary. On the left is the table that comes right out of CalPERS report showing that we have safety tier 1, 19 retired, 1 separated, 7 transferred, and 5 active. Miscellaneous classic, we have 9 retired, 4 separated, 3 transferred, and 4 active. Okay, and that's a little bit different on where do I get those numbers? Transparent California. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Transparent California shows miscellaneous classic retirees at 6 and safety tier 1 at 13. I have no explanation at this point. I couldn't reach anybody to find out why those two counts are different. But I will say, getting back to the CalPERS reports, which is predominantly what we're here to talk about today. CalPERS says that our miscellaneous employees earn an average pension of $21,336, and the 19 safety employees, it's a $35,065 average pension. But this is clearly brought down by the fact that we had 4 early career transfers. So I did my own calculations with the 5 safety pensioners who worked at least 20 years in Marinwood. They're collecting an average of $78,383.38 in their pension. As a reminder, we failed to opt out of Social Security, so these people are also drawing Social Security. The table by district and pension class for 2023-2024 show that district payments were district UAL payments were 10.4% of budgeted revenue and 48.84% of total salary. Not insignificant numbers. I've also broken that down by the 2 different plans. Based on 2022, district retirees were paid $595,000. That's 81% of the total payments. Beneficiaries, $109,900. That's 15%. And separated employees, those 4 who left early, $25,400, for a total of $730,800 that were paid in pensions last year. Okay. Yeah, they're still awake. It's good. Anyway. Okay, I've got some additional information. One note, Eric and I were having a lot of fun with the links on this document, and we kept on getting these messages about, oh, you're in big trouble, you're risking security with this document. So I got rid of the links. So one of the things that went away in that were the pension factor charts. You may remember those as these long charts that tell you how many years someone has served, what year they retire at, et cetera, and that gives you the percentage of their, in our district, for safety, the average of the last 3 years of their career. I have them, and I can post them somewhere if you would like, but I did take all those links off the document. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about discount rate sensitivity analysis. And this goes back to that list that we looked at rather briefly on page 2. And that is to note that 2022-23 is the first year since 2017-18 that the discount rate has not been reduced. Now, what does that mean? Each reduction of the discount rate has an upward impact on the UAL and the payments. So for the last 6 or so years, these granted infinitesimal 125 basis points or 250 basis points, these changes to get from 7.5 down to 6.8 have created upwards pressure on our liability, irrespective of how their returns came in. The discount rate is comprised of 2 percentages. The return, or the rate of return, is the assumed rate of return of 4.3%. The 2.5% remaining that gets you back to 6.8 is the assumed price inflation. Okay, so it's a combined percentage. All right? Sensitivity analysis, probably not a bad thing to look at, since who knows if they're gonna start, dropping the rate again next year. But just for further reference, if CalPERS were to reduce its assumed return on investment to 3.3 instead of 4.3, making the discount rate 5.8%, safety UAL would rise from 5.289 million to 7.478 million. Okay, that's an entire percent, though. As you can recall, or you can surmise looking at the 6 years, CalPERS is probably not crazy enough to drop the rate 1% in 1 year. But that gives you an idea of what that would mean. On the other hand, if they were to keep the rate of return the same at 4.3 and drop the inflation rate by 1%, then safety UAL would rise from 5.289 million to 5.87 million, a much less impact. Okay? So that's just something to keep in mind, information to just add to your toolkit as you read these reports. Finally, as far as I can tell, and I've looked for a couple hours, there have been no municipal bankruptcies since San Bernardino, which just, I think, solidified about 2 years ago, and Stockton, where they both declared bankruptcy in 2012. There's been nothing since. So you can say that, well, CalPERS may have sold a bill of goods to Ray Davis and the legislature at the time that they introduced 3 at 50. They've done a careful job of not blowing everyone out of the water as they start to ease up on their discount rate. Are there any questions?
I feel like I should get college credit for this.
So I just say, clear as mud?
Right. Does anybody have any questions?
It's just humbling.
I know,
Each
right?
time we go through it, it's very humbling. Yeah.
I mean, I would like to say thank you, just because the time that you're putting into this to make it at least somewhat understandable for a guy like me, I really appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah.
It's a big topic,
Right?
Yeah.
and
It's overwhelming.
and it does impact everyone in our district.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have a couple questions, Jeff.
Sure.
Just so I know that I'm clear on my definitions, on page 10, it lists transferred versus separated. I'm assuming that transferred means that they have left here to go work for a different CalPERS agency.
Correct.
But a CalPERS, not
Correct.
like a county one or something
That's
like
correct.
that. And separated means that they have left to go work for a non-CalPERS employer.
And you're absolutely right. All of those went to an MSERA employer.
Okay. And in both cases, none of those people have yet retired.
Correct.
So in a vacuum, let's say one of these transferred people winds up retiring. If you look at miscellaneous classic top line, it says 3 transferred, 9 retired, that would become 2 and 10.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then here's my next question that probably, I don't know that you can answer right off the top of your head, but it's something we've always kind of talked about and talked. When you're looking at these additional discretionary employer contributions,
So we're looking at page 9.
now we're on page 9. I'm assuming that is money paid directly to CalPERS, as opposed to putting money in a
Oh.
investment trust, similar to what we have with OPEB. Am I right in that assumption there?
I believe, I'm 99% sure it's directly to CalPERS.
To
You might as well just treat it as, well, the way we do things here is we pay all the, we pay the lump sum in July.
Mhm.
I would imagine we'd probably do something similar.
Right.
So then it would be the lump sum plus the estimated normal cost. No.
It would be
80, plus the ADP one column.
Sorry, the ADP one, I
Correct.
misspoke. I was pointing and then reading
Correct.
something else.
Right.
So, and then I guess my question would be, and this is the part that I wouldn't expect you to just be able to answer, and if you can, you should unretire. What is more beneficial? Is it more beneficial to pay CalPERS directly a little bit more? Or is it more beneficial to say, take that amount and put it into our own investment trust, similar to like the OPEB trust, like a section 115 type trust?
So like doing the 10-year thing that you were
Right.
saying, so instead of doing, so if I'm circling these right, the ADP one, the 68, 189 plus 20, 265, 743. So let's say 360,000. So you're saying like, do you put the 360 in a trust, or do you do that 360 and pay it to them? That's what you're asking?
Right.
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. What I can say, you're betting on yourself. You're betting that your trust is gonna beat whatever
Outperform, right.
CalPERS would do with it, but what you would not do is you would not be amortizing
Right.
your UAL, because CalPERS would not have the money.
Right. It
So-
wouldn't shrink the amortization timeline, but it would be calculated and impact what your total UAL is from an actuarial standpoint. Not necessarily from a CalPERS standpoint, but from a GASB like 68 standpoint.
So you're falling back on the OPEB.
Well, I'm using that as an analogy.
Right.
Because we have the OPEB trust, and when they run our actuarials to say, here's what your OPEB long-term liability is, the money we have in a trust offsets what that liability, in essence, brings that liability down.
Understood, yep. And
Now-
the risk associated, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So that is really a question I would have to ask of CalPERS, how they would treat that. Would they accept, a third-party analysis of what's going on with a trust fund earmarked to pay down the UAL?
Well, I think if you put it into a third-party trust, or even the CalPERS version of the trust, because they have
Okay,
a trust there too.
okay,
My linear logic tells me, if you had it set aside in a trust, it wouldn't affect these reports in any way, shape, or form.
I agree.
But it would ultimately affect what is known as GASB 68, because we also have to hire an outside actuarial that uses information from CalPERS, but that is what essentially goes into our audit. And then onto our balance sheet that says, these are what your actual unfunded accrued liability is. But when you have an asset, such as money sitting in a restricted trust that can only be used for this purpose, so again,
And so you're assuming.
there's too many variables to make it a very black and white question, because do you trust that you can find a trust that will actually achieve their target ROI versus CalPERS target
Yeah.
ROI?
Hmm.
If that makes sense. Like you might be able to perform better in a trust, you might perform better if you just give the money to CalPERS. My experience over the last several years has said
No.
CalPERS doesn't really perform all that well, so I don't know. I mean, sometimes they have 20% year, then the very next year they have a minus 6% year.
Right, yeah.
I understand it doesn't change the amortization timeline. You CalPERS would still be looking at their numbers from a 30-year perspective, because CalPERS wouldn't know
So we have
what
a
we
pot.
have sitting in a separate restricted pot.
Mhm.
But I'm just wondering what would be ultimately the most advantageous. I know once you give CalPERS the money, you can never get it back. It's theirs and that's the end of it. And to Jeff's point, these ADP1 numbers in this column are going to change every single year based on whatever their measurement year's rate of return was.
So like this year it's 360 for the two, next year it could be 700,
Right,
the next year it could be 250.
right. To Jeff's point, logic states that these numbers should go down a little bit
Right.
with the next report, because it's gonna be based on a 9.3% return as opposed to a 5.8% return. Because that's what they're claiming unofficially right now, that they hit a 9.3. And my other experience is, when they release that preliminary number, I don't think I've ever seen it actually change from what they then make their final number once it gets signed off on by people who don't get paid by CalPERS.
Well, and you're putting in money to reduce
Yeah, I don't know.
overall.
I guess it's just a way, because with this board and previous boards, we've talked about trying to address these things in various ways. I think Jeff, and this report, presents one potential way, with the other potential way being, building a set-aside trust. With, again, my point being, once you give this money to CalPERS, you never get it back, and if CalPERS tanks, you're out of luck. As opposed to you put it in a pot,
So-
you can, as that builds up, and the district finds itself in a cash needy situation, you can take from that pot specifically for the purpose of paying your CalPERS debts. If that makes sense. In the same way, like, with OPEB, we can pool from our OPEB trust right now and apply money towards that strictly for retiree healthcare costs. Not for active employee, but retiree healthcare costs. You can pull money to that. We never have, we just continue to put money into it. It's actually been doing pretty good from an investment standpoint and everything else. To where I think that is up to about $750,000 last time I checked. So that's, for somebody, an agency that hasn't been doing it very long and doesn't put a lot of money into it, you're almost at a point where you've got 20% of your UAL from an OPEB standpoint covered in a trust. It'll take a long time to get it all, but especially at our rate. So I don't know, I mean, I guess that's an open-ended question of what would be the more sound investment for the district to make? To try to shorten our amortization timeline, or to take an equal amount and put that into a separate trust? I don't know what the answer is, and I think I wouldn't ask CalPERS what that question is. I think that's where you ask, the actuarials, non-CalPERS actuarials,
Right.
people who are doing our GASB 68, basically.
Do you, help me recall, is the OPEB trust specifically earmarked for OPEB?
Yes, it cannot.
You cannot take it out for any other purpose?
No, the only thing you can take it out for is to apply it towards retiree health costs.
Right, okay, understood.
So it would set up the same thing for the pension if we were to
Yes.
set up.
Correct.
for the
If you
pension.
wanted.
Correct,
Same thing.
with some levels of difference in that, I don't know, like if you were to pull from it in a year of need, could you only pull as much as your, Jeff talked about in his presentation, that here's what retiree, here's the portion of your pension payments that are being applied towards retirees who are collecting. So you would need to siphon that number off, and that would be the only amount that you could pull from this trust. I don't know those answers because we haven't thoroughly looked into the pension side of the trust world, only the OPEB side of the trust world.
Well, on the pension side, the only thing that I'm worried about is, so in, would you say, I think it was the 31, it goes to almost $1 million for our UAL.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Not for our UAL, for total cash
Total.
outlay.
Total cash outlay.
Okay.
So that's your normal percentage plus your UAL.
Yeah, so if we give money to CalPERS, how does that adjust those numbers?
I don't know that answer, that's another part of the question too.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
I mean, that's what my worry is, because when it's in a trust, you have the discretion each and every year whether you want to take out to pay something else.
Right.
So, and
Right.
what you said, how is it gonna, if we pay it directly to CalPERS, how is that gonna reduce anything for the future?
Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, you can certainly make a case that paying anything to CalPERS is a risk.
Yeah,
Because oftentimes, they do not return what their discount rate is.
yeah,
It's been a problem, so I mean, you know, you could be just throwing money at something that isn't gonna help you in the long run, so.
As opposed to when you put it in a trust, it remains an asset,
And it still works for you and it grows,
in theory.
in theory, right?
Mhm. And, you know, there's bad years in the markets, you know,
Right.
investment markets have bad years. We had a year where we actually lost money in our trust from an investment standpoint. But for the most part, the line has gone up. It's made more money in the investment part than it's lost.
And helped us more than if we had not done it or given it straight up.
Right, and the thing about a trust and the way that we do it is, rather than one lump sum at the beginning, we make monthly payments. So when COVID hit, the market started to crash like mad, we stopped making monthly payments. Once the market stabilized, then we caught back up and were able to ride, you know, then made, like, so we didn't make, let's say, 5 payments monthly, because it just kept going down and down and down. So we held on to the cash, the market stabilized, we then paid all of those 5 months at once and let it ride that at the lower cost
Right.
and let it ride the wave back up. So those are kind of some of the options you get with the trust. And again, I am not a financial planner in this regard. When we did this with OPEB, which has probably been, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago now, we met with several providers of that. You know, from private companies to the CalPERS company, which is known as the California Employers Retirement Benefit Trust Fund, CERBIT. And wound up going with CalPERS because that made the most sense. They had the lowest fees, over time showed kind of the equal if not better performance and everything else, and wound up going with them. We would do the same where, you know, they have these companies, PARS I think is one of them. You know, there's a few companies that do this. There's some smaller private firms. I get a call probably once a month from some guy named Lloyd Weist at Weist and something law that does this. He's like, oh, I mean, if I could just do a presentation. We've talked about doing it, and then all of a sudden you get hit with a $750,000 project that you don't know is coming and you don't know if you're gonna be reimbursed for. So you kind of, you know, things wind up going on a back burner, but my experience also is once you start something, you find a way to keep doing it. Even with this, we still managed to put $100,000 into that OPEB trust as we had for all of those years before. And if you're really in a pinch, you just stop contributing. You know, and the money still sits there. It doesn't mean you're pulling the money out. It's just, okay, cash flow situations, we don't have the cash flow to be able to put into that at this point in time. And then when you do, or cash flow changes, you can always make that up, or you just start from that point and keep going. So I don't know, I would like to think, you know, we kind of get through that. It's something that we've always talked about. It's something that I would say is the next step, with the caveat being, how do you look at this from a big full circle of, does it make sense to, because let's be clear, on the OPEB trust, we're putting in 100,000, but the actuary says we should be putting in 300-something thousand a year. So where do you get your most bang for the buck? Do you go and put more into the OPEB trust and continue to neglect the pension burden, or do you put a little bit into both? You know, and again, it's that question of what's your biggest bang for the buck? If a little bit more into OPEB will have a larger impact on driving down that total liability, because these liabilities, I mean, yes, they're real cash outlay, and the pension cash outlay climbs at a rate that, dollar-wise, not a rate-wise, but dollar-wise, quicker than our health, although lately, that is to be debated. So I don't know, those are the three things you look at. What makes more sense? Just giving CalPERS some money so that way you start looking at this from a 20-year perspective, but you gotta do it every year, and then you gotta do it at whatever that new calculated amount is to stay at that 20-year horizon. Otherwise, you're gonna wind up at like a 22-year horizon or a 23-year horizon if they go down, or if they perform better, then you put in a little bit less, versus establishing a pension trust versus doing neither of those and putting more into the OPEB trust that we already have. I don't know.
All good questions.
Right? Things to think about and start planning for.
Yeah, I think that that's a little, all things created equal. It'd be nice to start actually getting some real information. It wouldn't be that hard to bring in somebody from the CalPERS version of their pension trust versus, and that, the CalPERS person could probably answer that question. The CalPERS pension trust person, why don't we just pay them directly and say, bring our liability down, as opposed to starting this trust and then bringing in a third party, a PARS or, a couple of these other groups, and meeting with them, either in a, I would say, you do a little research, have those initial conversations outside of the public meeting setting, and then if you whittle it down to 2, maybe 3 of them, you have a couple meetings where, one person comes in one meeting to present their pitch, and the next person, because ultimately that's a board decision to make. I don't have the authority to say, oh, we're starting a pension trust. The board has to sign off on that and then authorize me to act on behalf of it, but you guys have to approve it.
Yeah.
So, all things that, given that this board ain't going anywhere for at least the next 2 years, as it's currently made up, something worth, I mean,
Something to think about.
Do the bandwidth to investigate that?
let me get our payroll transition
Right.
first. Let me, FEMA's starting to crank back up again a little bit in terms of workload. No, right this second, Chris, to be blunt,
I wouldn't think so.
I do not.
Wouldn't think so.
I do not, but if we can get through a couple of those other things, I might be able to start looking at that, especially, if I'm looking at this from a bigger picture, can we start to put together some real concrete thoughts before next May, which is when the next budget gets adopted? Probably.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
sounds good.
Anyway, thank you, Jeffy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do
Thank you
appreciate
so
your
much.
time, I mean,
Yeah.
and it certainly leads, like I said, to those kind of other questions. It's one thing to know what it is, it's another thing to say, how are you gonna address
What
it?
are we gonna do?
Right.
You know, and again, this is half of our long-term debt equation, with OPEB being the other half, so
You bet. I know,
It's,
huge, both of them.
either way, they all add together at the bottom of the balance sheet, so
Yeah.
if you can get more bang out of your buck by bringing one down than the other, I don't know what that answer is.
So in closing, I hope that the 9.3% gives you some hope for next year. So
Until next year.
hopefully some
All right.
optimism. And the last thing, if I'm wrong, you can correct me, but I'm starting to feel that even though these reports are somewhat repetitive, they still sort of glaze you over a little bit. So if there's something I can do to make them simpler, more understandable, let him know.
Jeff, appreciate it. I totally appreciate it, and I like the fact that they've been kind of consistent
Mhm.
in the same way, so that it's easier to wrap your head around it, because you've seen this the previous year, and now you've seen, I liked how you pointed out where there was some changes.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I know I
Thank
yawned,
you.
but it's not you, it's life, not you. This was not, it's important, and I
Yeah.
wasn't
I was
lazy.
expecting the yawn.
Okay, but I'm just wondering.
It's important, but it's certainly not.
Let's be honest, I'm old and it's 8.
Thank you so much. Really
I'll get
appreciate
out of
it.
your hair so
Thank
you
you.
can get the rest of your business done. Thank you.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Jeff.
Jeff.
Appreciate it.
And that concludes this week's edition of Math in Marinwood.
Thanks, Jeff.
You bet.
Now on to item H2, district manager report.
All right, I'll go quick on this. Just really quick on the fire station bunk room. I don't really have too much to say other than it is sitting at the county. It is currently day 16 of their allotted 30-day review period. If I was a betting man, I would say that means we have 14 more days until we're gonna hear anything from them. And I imagine they'll take right up to day 30. But as soon as those get approved, we can start moving forward on that other project. Payroll conversion, that has really picked up a lot of steam. I certainly think Tiffany, she's put in a lot of time, sat in on a lot of calls. We're getting there. We have a pretty aggressive goal to be able to actually be live with our new payroll company for the pay date of October 4th, which basically means that's a pay period beginning in 5 days. I don't know if we're gonna be able to get there or not. We'll see. It would be nice if we could, because that also represents the first pay date of a new quarter, which will make it a lot cleaner when it comes to, because they also handle all of our payroll tax payments and everything, and a lot of things are kind of looked at from a quarter by quarter standpoint. That's the way it's done. It'd be nice if I had one single provider for each quarter and was easily, could pool the reports that I need for various reasons easily on that. But if we have to do it in the middle of a quarter, we won't be the only company in the world that's ever had to do it in the middle of a quarter.
How many chocolates do we need to bring to the
Yeah.
Coffee.
Yeah, margaritas.
No.
That one go backwards.
And then just so you know, because we kind of got forced to switch payroll companies, we're trying to put a little bit of a silver lining on it. The payroll company we used was dated, our time collection methods is dated. Once we are comfortable and we know that payroll is working with our current internal methods of time collection and reporting, we will be moving to a time and attendance system, hopefully within a payroll period or 2, maybe 3 at the most, where all payroll will be entered directly, all hours worked will be entered directly, through a clock in, clock out system that's part of the ADP system. We're already paying for it, which will make, instead of paper timesheets, which in the summer can be this thick, everybody has it, all the codes are proper. It'll be a lot easier for the managers to go through and approve and say, yep, those were the hours they were scheduled, yes, they actually worked those days, done, and then it rolls up to Tiffany from there, and hopefully, literally you could probably cut an entire day out of every 2 weeks of Tiffany's life when it comes to doing that. And then finally, not to mention all the time our supervisors have to spend going through all of these paper timesheets, doing actual math, doing everything else, trying to read handwriting, which
Teenage handwriting
It's a lost
is
art.
fun.
I
It's a
feel
lost
like they're writing it with their left hand if they're writing it. It's
It's only getting worse. I don't know what's going on, but it's only getting worse.
It really is. And then the other part that they have is an actual scheduling system that employees have access to. This would be more for our seasonals, but they can go through and see what their schedule is. We use a different third-party system right now for it. We would transition off of that and put everything kind of under this one big umbrella. So it's a conversion, it's a project. I think once we get it done, breathe for a minute and everything's working and we're comfortable with it, it'll actually be a whole lot better.
Great.
Then I'll have margarita.
Right.
Yeah, then it's margarita time, right. And then finally, just a quick update on the fire prevention stuff. Actually, I think it's starting next Monday, I believe is the start date. They will begin working on our next kind of fire prevention, fire fuel reduction, which will connect the open space, basically going from behind Peachstone Terrace all the way back along Las Colinas, up the road over toward Blackstone and kind of end at where Blackstone Canyon and Horn Trail is, which will create a fuel reduction zone that extends from there all the way around to the county facilities. So basically our single most vulnerable open space area with easily the most residents living in the WUI right there, we'll have a continuous fire reduction zone for it.
Who's doing the work, Eric?
The work itself
Yeah.
is gonna be, on this one is a company called Forster and Kroger.
Okay, so it's one of the subs that we picked up.
Yeah, they're an approved, and we, kind of have our own list that we use, and Santa Fe does as well, and the Santa Fe is, we utilize they kind of put together the whole thing, put it out to bid.
No, I got that. It's just, what I was wondering, because there's so many other projects ongoing.
Yeah.
The Novato, we've got the Ross Valley, everything else. So little by little, it's all gonna be interconnected eventually.
At some point.
Yeah.
There'll probably be pockets where it's not, but those pockets won't be part of the quote-unquote WUI.
No, but what I'm looking at is, they're taking out a lot of lower,
Oh, yeah.
so when fire rises,
Yep.
that's where you wanna escape.
Uh-huh.
And nothing's been done, I know, on Peachstone, anywhere along that line.
It's been done
The goats have been around.
to Peachstone.
Yeah,
All the way at the end, at the western end is kind of where it stopped.
From
carried this
Idleberry in.
basically from Queenstone Fire Road.
right,
They went in a little ways. So
Yeah.
now they're gonna start where that stops, make their way all the way
Okay.
down along Peachstone until you get to, what is that Opal Stone that comes in right there?
correct. Well, Opalstone really doesn't do a whole lot, but yeah, the backside of Opalstone
Right, but that's where it'll go.
around there.
Exactly, yeah, that's the
Okay.
path that it will
Because some
follow.
of that is pretty steep too, so,
Oh yeah,
oh yeah.
oh, it's gonna be real tough. Yeah, I'm glad we're not the ones doing the work. But so that'll be good.
Okay, thank
And
you.
all that starts next week, probably take a few weeks to get all of that work done, it'll clean up, it is very steep, there's a lot of debris, they'll do some limbing, they'll get rid of the flashy
Right.
fuels. It's not really a goat grazing area, mostly because it's all kind of southern exposure, there's not a lot of flashy grassy fuels that goats would go through there and eat, but there's, brush and things like that are still considered
But there's
flashy
a
fuel.
lot of debris.
Yeah, oh yeah, so those clear all of that out, they'll chip in place, when needed, they'll haul out as best they can. The other real challenge is access,
Oh, yeah.
cause you can't, there's no ways to get vehicles back there. They have a mobile chipper that they can get back there, it's almost like on a little a little Bobcat, but a chipper. So they can kind of get that back through there, and chipping and spreading is absolutely considered a best practice. So if they have to chip and spread, they will, or they can lop and scatter as well, which is for some of the larger limbs, cutting those down and letting them lay and decompose and just keeping them spread.
I can tell you that people have been waiting for that for a long time.
Yeah, well, it's coming. It's not gonna look as dramatic as along Idleberry or that part behind, because it's a different landscape, a completely different landscape. So, but it'll look a lot nicer.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for everything.
Yeah,
And
so lots going on.
Yeah, right? Thank you
Yeah.
to everyone on the staff helping make that happen. Item I1, fire department matters. Does anybody have any questions about the chief's report?
No, just thank you again, guys, for
Right.
being so quick.
I haven't been up on the hill since this, or in that direction. Does this, and I haven't heard that anybody got hurt in actual fighting the fire or anything like that. Does this amount to like a controlled burn, on some levels?
I'm not necessarily the right person to ask that.
There's a lot of
I see
fuel in there. I hike
a lot.
through there a lot. Like, there's a lot of fuel in there.
Mhm.
Just don't know.
Well,
if
there's an 18-acre section where there's less fuel.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that is for sure. There's definitely some damage done to the surrounding areas just for access purposes.
Okay.
I know the county is working on, they had a lot of areas on Pawnee Fire, or Pawnee Trail that they had to go in and repair.
Oh.
And we're also looking at the, even some of the areas where, kind of the social trails that have been developed. They literally took a bulldozer straight down those
Oh,
things. Oh yeah, they had dozers up there, they had fire trucks up there, they had water tenders up there, they had UTVs up there. And I know that, they put in some dozer lines to act as fire breaks and, fixing the trail, somebody else's problem. Their concern is get the access to this thing out.
So the upper Pawnee Trail took a hit during this then?
It did.
Okay.
It did, but understandably so.
Sure, absolutely.
And
Okay.
they did great. I mean,
Yeah.
they were on it, it was hard to access, and as you all know, as soon as those air tankers came in, that was the game over.
Yeah.
Right.
I have one question.
Go for it.
It looks like we had a hazmat incident in Marinwood. Any idea what the hell that was?
Are you looking at the
stats?
At the response chart?
Yeah.
Is that the natural gas leak?
It very well could have been. I don't know what it was. Discussion of natural gas leak on Greenberry. Yeah, that would be a hazmat deal.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that's pretty awesome, 9 minutes from the call to getting the gas shut off, it's pretty freaking fast.
Okay.
But I can certainly ask that question for you, Bill. I don't,
I was just curious.
I'm not confident on the
Because
answer.
we don't see a lot of hazmat.
Somebody's looking
Right.
at
Usually it's a freeway incident.
I was gonna say, usually it's on like Lucas Valley Road or Northwest.
Uh-huh.
Do we have any updates on, I feel like last time we spoke about there were, I won't have the right terminology, maybe some people interested in our open position?
Yes, we have some applications.
Okay.
Yeah, they are vetting through the applications, and if they meet qualifications, they'll set some interviews.
Okay. So there's some progress there, great.
Not a lot,
Right?
so temper expectations.
Okay.
And meeting the minimum qualifications is step one.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we have some that apply that just don't meet the, I'm a paramedic, I've never taken an actual fire course in my life, but, looks fun, kind of a thing, and it's like, yeah, the firefighting part of it's pretty important.
Right.
It's because you worked for AMR for the last 3 years, you're only halfway there.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions about the fire stuff? All right. We're gonna move on to park and recreation matters, J1.
I'll take that.
Welcome back, Luke.
It's been great. Well, the big things to report is that we had the end of our summer camp season since we last met, and it was a great summer. Everything went really well. It was one of our busiest summers in terms of attendance and number of kids that we had on our campus all summer. One of the hottest weather summers, but as far as how everything went, I was very impressed with the staff, very impressed with how everything ran. It was crazy. We had lots of crazy kids and interesting families and lots of stuff to deal with, but overall, the staff were fantastic this summer and everything ran really well, and it was a really positive experience all the way through. So extremely proud of the staff and happy with everything. Happy that it's done also, but it was really a good summer. So all more stats for you guys, but we served 1,075 individual families this summer, which is I don't know if that's the highest number we've ever had, but it was up from last year, and I'll have a little bit more of a breakdown I was working on this week with Robin in terms of like how many different residents and people and stuff, but we'll put a little report together for you guys next time. But we ran 13 camps over 9 weeks, 3 years through, entering 7th grade, plus a really big CIT program for middle school kids. It was a really great season. We're all really happy with that. We're still working on the financials of that as expenditures keep coming in. I think we typically do our big post-summer and pool season report for you guys, like after the pool goes up. So stay tuned for that, but we'll have numbers to kind of show in the coming months. The pool is still going strong. We went into our fall season on August 19th, and we're currently running lap swim, rec swim, swim lessons, pool parties, water polo, and then a new program this fall. We're running 2 days a week. There's a group running some swim clinics for swim team kids that are off season. It's we've got a group coming called SOMAC Swim, and one of the Water Devils coaches is helping run that, but it's a private organization that runs clinics for kids just to keep them getting in shape, to keep them swimming in the off season. Probably comes something similar to your program, Chris, but for.
Yeah, that's it sounds great, the kids,
Yeah,
I saw the kids going down there tonight.
Yeah, it's been a pretty well attended. I don't know exactly how many kids they have in total, but it seems they've got a ton of kids in the pool, and it seems like it's a good program. So we're happy that we're able to accommodate that, and the schedule works out. So we can be able to staff it, so that's nice. And I just want to shout out John Paul, who has been keeping the pool staffed, and our pool has, I think, looking at the neighboring public pools, we have much more extensive hours open right now than a lot of our neighboring public pools. And I know a lot of the reason that those hours are limited other places is staffing challenges. So I want to thank John Paul for just kind of keeping a positive culture down there, keeping people interested, and we're able to, somehow finagle more lifeguards in these challenging seasons when a lot of our staff are either at college or going to school all day. But we've been able to kind of keep some of these other people that are either going to school late or some random people in transitional periods of life coming through. So I'm really glad that we're able to stay open and keep our normal schedule, which is not a given, judging by some of the other pools. So I've actually gained a lot of new swimmers down there as well from other places either closing the doors or having limited hours this season. So hopefully we can hold on to them and they'll just become new pool members moving forward. But the pool's going great. Our last music in the park was awesome. It was on August 23rd. We had Mercy and the Heartbeats, which was a returning band from last year, which was a huge hit, and I was really happy to get them back to close out our series. It was one of our most populous, one of our most well-attended music in the park nights that I've seen. We had like over 500 people in the park by our estimate, and no issues, no lost kids. Everyone had a great time. And so we're really happy about that. And our next event will be the Fall Art Show later this month on September 21st, it's a Saturday from 3 to 7, which we're looking forward to. And then after that will be our Halloween Harvest Festival on October 11th. So those are our upcoming events for this fall season. We're currently in our fall schedule, our preschool programs, it's like third week, our after school program, and we have a whole bunch of rec classes going on right now. The place is just buzzing with programs. We've got a few new programs and a bunch of returning ones, and things are going really well with all those getting started. So the community center is just alive well. No break for the rec staff, but we're happy things are going well. On the parks maintenance side, the staff have been kind of helping get things recovered after summer. We had a few irrigation repairs in the park and at the pool lawn to deal with, and there's some further improvements that the staff are working on to kind of improve efficiency and coverage. We started some turf treatment today. The staff are out there aerating the turf, and we'll do that again in a month and add seed and fertilizer and try to get things where all the dead spots from all the kids and various things in the summer, we'll try to get all that rehabilitated and looking green for the rest of the season. We've had some tree work the past couple of weeks. We had a bunch of trees come down in the wind. One big one, a tree split on the Panhandle path, and we had a couple of trees come down above Ian's house over near the Queenstone, the start of the Queenstone Trail. And got all that cleaned up, plus a couple of dead trees near the tennis courts were taken out, and we have continuing work planned for some of the walking trails where some trees need to be taken out and thinned out, which will be happening in the coming weeks and months. Staff did a lot of work around the community center to get it ready for our fall programs in the preschool. We've got some things cleaned up and painted, and things are looking much better after the summer. And upcoming projects, we've got work out at Creekside Park to do some repairs. We did have some vandalism out there. I think vandalism out there on one of the play structures at the playground. One of the platforms was broken, similar to what we've seen a few times in past years at the mini park, possibly from big kids out there jumping around, breaking the stuff. Hoping that doesn't turn into a trend, but we have a new platform on order, and we'll be installing that as soon as it shows up. But in the meantime, the playground remains open and usable, and there's no safety hazards there. But staff will be working some work out there later this week. And we have a bunch of projects going on this fall, but that's all I'm going to touch on. Please let me know if you you guys have any questions.
We're still able to find pieces and stuff.
Yeah, so the playground at, the two playgrounds at Creekside are the same company that's at from the one at the mini park, and those, that was different from the one in the main park.
Okay.
They do still source parts for those, and they're able to get them to us relatively easily. They're not cheap, but they're easy to find, whereas we weren't able to get the platforms
Yeah.
and things for the
I didn't know
playground, so.
if they were different companies.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like
thankfully,
bracing myself.
No, I have a good contact there, and they're easy to work with, and they still make the parts. They just kind of cost a lot, and they're a hassle to deal with, put them in. But this was a really small, like entry-level step, so it didn't hinder our ability to keep the playground open, and it should be pretty straightforward to get it done.
Anybody else with any other questions? I think the only question I would have, well, first I want to say thank you to everybody on the aquatic staff being down there twice a week. It's like, still impresses me how well things run, even when those kids are all either gone or in high school, and then they come to guard it in the afternoon, so I appreciate that. Also selfishly, are we planning to repair the lighting?
Yes.
Okay.
And these guys should be putting on the lights for you because they do work. Like, I think there's some intermittent issues with the lighting on it, but the historical lights down there should be being turned on because they do most of the work. Sometimes they come on. We do have a plan to get new lighting. We're working on getting a couple different quotes right now. And so I don't know how quickly that's going to transpire, but that is one of our full projects. So I probably won't help you out this season.
Oh, it's not about me, I just know.
No, but it's something that we're definitely,
It's kind of.
Depends on the time of year.
I also just wanted to say thank you for another amazing summer and another amazing music season at the park, and Beer Fest and everything. You guys knocked it out of the park again. And I know it's a lot to do all at the same time in the summer. It all hits at the same time, but it was awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
What impresses me is the community involvement with this.
Yeah.
Music in the park, I don't think I've ever seen bigger crowds all for.
And it's not all, it's not all
And same with
Marinwood.
the beer.
Yeah.
It was just great because there were a lot of young families. Oh my God, so many young families.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, we don't get all of Marinwood coming to all of our stuff. At the events, we tend to get a little bit of a different, crowd comes out for those. And yeah, it seems like there's a lot of new families, a lot of great, new faces, which is been really fun to see.
Yeah, I knew a lot of people
great.
who were coming from San Rafael out by the JCC,
Oh, really?
but they're coming out to do that. So it's like really spreading that this is the place to be.
There's a lot of agencies doing concerts in the park.
Yeah,
Right.
and so that the fact that we're doing it and they're coming here versus other places,
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's great. Well, thank you.
Pretty solid experience.
Thank you to you,
Oh, we can
convey
get that,
our
guys.
appreciation to your staff, and
Absolutely.
I probably think your wife as well.
Yes.
Anybody have items of interest?
just maybe putting on what we discussed of, do we do a trust, do we pay down?
Kind of following that up. in
Yeah,
the
just
future.
following up that, when you have a moment, after we get through some other things, that would be really great.
I'd like to get through negotiations.
Everybody else good?
I think so.
All right, and I see we are adjourning at 8:20. Thank you guys for being here tonight, appreciate it.